My mission is to find a cure for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, no matter what it takes.
This is The Hope Show, powered by All-American Ford, Alfano Renovations, and Adapting Social. Now let's dive in. Hello and welcome to The Hope Show. I'm Jim Raffone, your host. As always, our show is inspired by Jamesy, powered by Adapting Social, and sponsored by All-American Ford in Old Bridge and Mike Alfano from Alfano Renovations. This afternoon, I'm excited to have our newest guest, Alessandro.
Hi.
Sorbara. A little tongue twisted today. All right. Well, I'm excited to have him on, and I'm going to let him share why he's here today. So good afternoon and welcome to the show.
Hi. Yeah.
How you feeling? You comfortable?
Yeah, comfortable.
Excellent.
Well, let me think, because it's been a lot, but let me think. I guess the main reason I'm on here, the sales pitch I gave to my hairstylist, because she was sold on my podcast. So, that's the best place to start, of course.
I love it.
But about a year and a half ago, closer to a year and a half, a bit over that, I got diagnosed with autism. And my favorite analogy ever to talk about what that was it felt like being diagnosed. It felt like being sent to like a fantasy world where like everyone's speaking like a different language. Like it's like they speak in like symbols. Like you don't know what anything is. You don't know what the rules are. And like some old wizard comes and like gives you a map and is like, okay, have fun. And it's like, okay, this is really helpful. Sure, I get like how this works now, but like, what does this mean? Like that's my favorite analogy for like what was happening. And I had the map, I just didn't know how to navigate the land. So I was stuck for, I want to say, a really long time. And I just hit a point where I'm like, nothing makes sense. I'm not happy. I'm waking up every day. I'm just nervous of everything. Like, I'm struggling. I don't feel weird. I feel weird talking about, like, what I experience on the daily. I don't know how to talk to my parents about any of this because I need help. I just don't know how to articulate that I need the help. So just out of complete, like, desperation, I'm like, you know what if AI? I was like, you know what? Let me see if, and in about a week, I was starting to develop such a framework of like what I am and like what makes sense. And I was like, oh my God, like there were so many common links of like everything. And I'm like, wait a minute, like this is so obviously like coherent under the surface. And so much of why I've struggled makes so much sense. And like, I just wanted to come on and talk about my experiences just because I think it's such an interesting story and,
And I greatly appreciate you being brave enough and have the courage to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to get my story out, but...
So let's, if we can, right, for our audience, for those who are not familiar with autism and how it affects the body, right? Because we've been around a lot of children who have... who do not have the ability to communicate. So this is great that you're here and you can actually speak for those who are unable to speak for themselves, right? So let's start when you were younger. So you're 20 now, going to be 21. When's your birthday?
March 16th.
March 16th. So James's birthday is March 31st.
Oh.
Look at that. So we got you guys are sharing the same birthday month. I love that. But let's go back to, let's say you're 10 years old.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Right. So bring us along from when you're 10 to now, and what were you experiencing at that time of your life?
I guess just because I think it's worth noting, I guess when I talk about my experiences, I don't want to speak. How do I say this? I know the autism spectrum is so broad and there's so many different reasons like for everyone's experiences with it. So I guess I'm more so coming on to speak about my experiences and be like, if this hits with you, like awesome sauce. If not, then that's totally fine because there's just so many different ways that autism happens to present. So
you're so good at this.
I know. That's
like a footnote we got to put on.
I know, it's a big footnote.
That was great to say. Thank you.
Let me think. When I was a kid, how do I say this? It was always like I don't like I guess sudden like anticipatory noises, and that's always been a problem for me. I remember when I was a kid, one of my like youngest memories was we were at I think it was like some event like a hospital was doing or something, and they had like the balloon animals, and I got one, and I remember it just popped in my hand, and that was like, oh God, that kind of like set me up for, and we go to parties like after this, and it was like, well, there was balloons there and like they might pop and I don't know if they're gonna pop or not. And that's, what if they pop? And I just didn't know like how to handle that. And my parents would be like, oh, like, it's not gonna hurt you. It's not gonna, it's not gonna hurt you. There's nothing to be afraid of. It can't hurt you. Nothing bad's gonna happen. And I'd be like, well, I know that. I just can't stop like.
So it created anxiety for you.
Kind of, sort of. Yeah. What I've come to realize is it sounds a lot like anxiety, but like it just doesn't listen to anxiety, if that makes any sense. Like, I'll give some more examples. At school, like with all the, like the fire drills and stuff, like that was horrible for me. Like that was probably my hardest thing about school, was just how like bad those were for me. Right? Like I remember in preschool, like I know like children tend to be bothered by them, but like for me it was, this wasn't like, oh, this is a bad event. This was, oh my God, like I'm literally like checking the weather, looking for like little signs, and like the teachers looking for like, like trying to predict when it's going to happen, just because like it was so like hard to do that. And that kind of ties in perfectly, because you're like, like what happened when you're 10. I have one pretty rough incident, I think, where a lot of like the rules that I learned kind of growing up kind of like established into place. And so my teacher one morning, we were in school one morning, and she's like, oh, like everyone just put like your coats by your bag just in case like there's like a fire drill or something. And I was like, oh my God, like I remember that just completely like sent me like for like an oh no, And it was towards like the end of the month, right? So there was like, I think like a good like week and a half left of school at that point, or at least of January. So I'm like, well, it's gonna happen eventually. At this point, I knew it was a problem. I knew like I didn't know what the issue was. Again, I didn't really entertain autism until I was older. But, and I, how do I remember that very last week of school, like mom sent me like an email from like the principal, like nothing's gonna happen this week. I remember every single morning, I think every morning for the most part, like I was just sobbing in like the classroom, just crying because I didn't know what was gonna happen. And I go to the nurse and she'd be like, oh, like, you're fine, like it's not gonna happen today, like go back to class. And like I was a very like, I guess, well-behaved kid, which I think honestly too just comes from like, I know people are like, oh, you're so well-behaved. I've always seen it as like, I'm just horribly afraid of like ever being told like of getting in trouble for stuff. Like, I remember in kindergarten, mom was like, oh, like your teacher, she said like, why do you take, she was like, well, what do you do to him at home? And because I just didn't take well to being told no, not in like a oppositional way, just like fear, I guess. And they're like, like we don't do anything to him. Like, what do you mean? So that was kind of distressing. And then, so the last day of the month comes, and like at this point, the drill still hadn't happened, but I knew it was kind of just like imminent, right? And so my teacher, I remember like the vice principal came, and I don't know if she had like, I don't know if like it was told, or like if she came to visit for whatever reason. And then she left, and the teacher was like, oh, there's gonna be a drill soon. And I like broke down like crying. And like at this point I was just like completely out of it. Like I remember like pants on me, like floating my ears. I was crying like. And she, I remember she tried offering me like a fidget toy, and I was just gone at that point. And like, this isn't a criticism of the teacher, you can't blame, like I can't say like, oh, like shame on you for not understanding, because nobody did, honestly. But I remember just sobbing in that like classroom, like lined up, and like there were like students like seeing me and like kind of like dancing around me, and like when they're, and I'm like, what's happening? But that was very like, I don't want to say traumatizing, because I don't really, how do I say this? It wasn't traumatizing in a sense. I think imprinting is the word I like. Like I learned a lot about like, don't trust anyone with your issues, And then it definitely got worse, just because I kind of learned like this is something bad that can happen. So then like I'd be checking the weather, be checking, for like bad days, and my parents would be like, like I'd be like, okay, I don't want to go to school today, and I'd be like upset and just terrified of school, because I had predicted, okay, maybe this is the day that like there might be a fire drill. And my parents, they were like, oh, like you'll be fine, like go, and like I remember like being like put out of bed, being yelled at. Like I remember once, I think my mom like threatened the police on me. I was like, oh, yeah, hi mom. But that's fun. So that was fun, and so. This was when I was in high school, and like I remember in high school too, like it's weird just because there's a lot of stuff that was so like pre-diagnostic of like what I was trying to do to like get through it. I remember like, this was probably not a healthy way to do it, but my mom would, me at least, I don't know why I said mom, but I was like, you know what if I stay up overnight, like the day before I think something might happen, like I'm like, like there's this, how do I say it, like it'd be like 11, 12 o'clock at night, and be like, well, I could sleep, but then had going to school soon, because I'd be up at 6 in the morning, or I'm like, well, I could stay up, I could just be groggy all night, but then the time will go by slower, and then, school won't be as much of like an abrasive, like, oh, get up, go to school thing, you know, kind of just bracing like all night. Not in like a tense way, just like don't go to bed, don't sleep, just stay up, like keep track of the time. And this was like, I was like 14, like a freshman in high school, because this was when I was learning like these issues are weird. I should be over this, but I literally can't get over it, you know, and that was hard too.
So at this point, were there any sort of clinical visits to kind of help you?
As a child, I was seen for autism stuff as a young kid. I think the issue is just because I was so young and because I was seeking more so autism than like, I guess, an Asperger's at the time. It was just, I kind of just flew under the radar, honestly. And at this point, again, like I guess you think of autism, you don't really think of like, you know, what that looks like in paper, just because again, like you can't expect anyone to know what that means, you know. I didn't. And then it's just crazy, like, you know, like the balloons were still an issue, even like stuff like silly stuff like for a while I had this friend group online, and like that was like my only like social outing spot, you know, like you know, and that was always hard for me to step away from, just because that was like the only place where I felt okay to like kind of like let my guard down, you know. Like, granted, it's weird, like I've never had like phone usage issues, like, you know, it's not like I'm definitely not like a compulsive phone user, like I put it away, I don't really care. I think it's more of like, it's weird, it's like I've always seen it as more of like an autonomy thing, like, you know, it's, you know, like when autonomy gets like stripped away from me, like I tend to collapse very, very quickly, you know. And I guess I'll get back, but the big thing, because then around, I want to say 2020-ish, COVID happened, right? And, you know, we were in lockdown for a year, which was, I guess, good and bad. Like, it kind of let me learn, like, what is school like without this big issue, because, you know, we were home, they couldn't do anything. But I was like, you know, like, what does this look like? And it was all right, I guess. Like, it felt like a whole blur. But I remember I came back junior year, and I was, you know, 16 now. I'm like, well, this is still an issue, but I can't really talk about it because I'm too old for this now, you know? So it just creates more friction of, like, well, like, what do I do? And I remember,
as a parent, I have to say, for you to articulate this and to go through it and have these feelings, it breaks my heart for you, you know, and I feel terrible.
And then here's the crazy thing, too, is just the way I kind of learned to, like, deal with it. So I remember when I was 16, like, what I would do in school was, I was kind of like I stayed out of trouble, so a lot of teachers just trusted me. And I was like, wait a minute. I don't like noise. I don't like sudden noise. What if I replace said noise with something that, like, I can control? So what I started doing was, I was like, well, I had noise canceling headphones in my backpack just because sometimes I listen to music in school. But I'm like, what if I put them on and I just blast the volume? I called it like just out louding the loud, because I'm like, well, if my headphones are loud and like I can't hear anything, then like I don't have to worry about this anymore, because, you know, I won't be, you know, I won't feel tense, because you figure it's not, you know, it's like the whole body just felt like tense, and like something's, you know, if it, like just constant like vigilance, like what's gonna happen, do I need to, you know? And I sit in school for like hours, like this kind of like, see, like the ears kind of like, and I'd hold for like hours, and I remember my hands would be like sore, and like I'd have pins and needles, and like sometimes I got pimples, so that wasn't effective. So,
and how was your schoolwork? If you
I was fine
doing noise canceling, like
academically, I didn't really pay the price at all. Like I was still able to keep up with classes, you know.
Was it fascinating?
You know, that's the thing I always say. It's like autism feels like, at least for me, it's been like, it's like everyone has it. It's like you don't really fit into like the common issue, and then like it just feels like weird, right? Like, you know, for me, school wasn't hard because I was struggling academically. It was because it was an overwhelming environment, and I just was always predicting like what was going to happen, or like what the biggest threat would be. So with the headphones, I was like, you know, like I remember just sitting in school, like sometimes like if I had no work and I just sit there and like I have music blasting, I'd be sitting there like just scratching the headphones, just trying to make as much noise like as possible, just to like keep myself, you know, I guess regulate would be the word, you know, like I guess it was more so just unconsciously realizing that was like my best attempt at trying to like self-regulate. And I think that's really fascinating in retrospect. Just like, you know, I was 16, nobody knew what was going on. I didn't even know how to word it, and like I'm just sitting here like scratching my head in school just because that's the only thing keeping me from like, you know, that's keeping me from like spiraling in school.
Now, did the teachers pick up on this?
No.
So you hid it from them? Like,
yeah,
you did what you did?
I did what I did, and I just went through the day. It was, you know, I tried to keep it low profile just because I never wanted to bring attention to it, just because I didn't have the vocabulary for it, you know. And
well, you're very well spoken.
Yeah, I just, at the time I didn't, because I'd be like, oh, I'm scared. But the issue wasn't so much I was afraid. It was just I didn't know when it was going to happen, and it was, you know, it was unpredictable. It was sudden. I didn't know what to. and I guess that's where my main issue is with what my autism I found, and I guess I could get back to that soon. But it was just I didn't know how to word like. I didn't feel afraid, and I knew for a while like this isn't going to respond to exposure therapy. This isn't going to respond to just getting over it. This isn't gonna, because like I say, if it was an exposure thing, I would have probably gotten over it from just constantly being exposed. But it got worse. It got worse. It just got neutral. But it was just like no teacher. I mean, granted, I also tried very hard to not make it apparent that I was struggling. And I mean, at least for me, like I noticed a lot of people would just be like, oh, you just look like a little bit different or quirky from the outside, even if I could be, like in the trenches internally, I guess it's just like that weird like dichotomy,
Right. Yeah.
But I think that's kind of everything up to a point. And I guess the big like turning point for me was at this point I was 17 and I had this friend group online. I remember one day I just like had a rough thing and I put this whole big message into the group of like what was it going on in my head. And one of them was like, hey, like, have you ever considered that like you might be autistic? And I'm like, meh, like, whoa, And I was like, you know what, like maybe. And she kind of talked to me. And in retrospect, like a lot of what she was talking about was kind of not really what my autism looks like, but it was still foundational to like getting the ball rolling. So I'm like, you know what, like I think this is a bigger issue. Like I don't really like, I don't speak on self-diagnosis. I still think you have to go see a professional for autism, of course, but I also, sometimes like sometimes you just know like something's not right? Like, and I was like, if it's not autism, I don't know what it is. Like I checked through like some other, like I checked through anxiety, I checked through PTSD, I checked through even like avoidant personality disorder. I'm like, none of this fits the bill the same way autism does. Even if I didn't have the words for it, it was just nothing fit it as well. And like I don't have trauma. My parents were I wasn't abused or I wasn't treated poorly growing up, So that didn't make sense. And it didn't make sense why the fire drill would be so traumatic to just like a child in a typical sense when there was nothing to provoke it. So I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like so I was kind of like, I think it's autism, but I don't want to say for certain because again, I wasn't diagnosed. And I want to say March, right? It was March 2023. I was just turning 18. And I was like, you know what, like I have to complain about this because like until I move on from this, like and get answers, like I'm going to be stuck and I'm just going to be like on my own. So I remember in school, I was in like the study hall in my high school and I was like, Mom, like I need to go to therapy. Like I need to get this sorted out. And she was like, okay,
amazing.
like, and that week, I think like that Wednesday, like I guess therapy itself was like a really interesting experience just because like, I mean, granted, it was also like, how do I say it? I think a lot of the problem I experienced before I got diagnosed was everything felt weird to explain, like my how I self-regulate, what bothers me, what that felt weird, but it was also I was kind of trying to like mold to like what autism was like, so I'm like kind of like mixing up like things that aren't really autism that aren't really representative of my autism, but then also like things that I feel are too weird that might have nothing to do with autism at all. So it's this weird like split of like, well, what do I do? So basically let me think. So therapy was like, so I started therapy and I was in for just a while of like talking through things and just kind of getting like as kind of addressing stuff, but also not perfectly, but also enough that I kind of felt like a bit more understood about like my problems. And I remember something very interesting that happened was, I was a senior at this point, right on the verge of graduating high school. And I remember I was kind of just going to stick through it with school. And, I did obviously for high school at least, but I was like, you know what, like I have a therapist, like why don't I try to get the fire drills accommodated? Like I'm like, I literally have the means to do it. And I remember I went to I want to say I guess the student assistant office at the school, because I remember like it was during like AP testing season, so like the counselor wasn't available for me. So I went to to another office and I was like, look, like this is a problem, like can I address this? And I remember like I think what would have helped me best was like like I said, like the easiest thing would have just been like, I need to know when it's happening, so that way I could be off of school and just come back when it's done and just, I don't have to, it's just, there's no thought, there's no like what ifs, it's just I'm here or I'm not here and then I come back and it's done. And I think the comment I tried to get and like it was, how do I say it? It was like, I would get pulled out before like it happened, it was like I guess like 5 minutes before, like a couple minutes, they would just pull me out of class. And I was like, and right away, like, I think this was kind of like a hint that, like, I don't know if it was the answer. And I was like, well, what if she's absent? Like, what if the person who pulls me is out, So it solved the issue. It just shifted it to a new one. And it was like, well, like, what do I do with this, And that was weird because I'm like, well, I'm accommodated, but like, what if the accommodation happened? And I only got it once because it was the end of the school year, like literally like May. So I got it in May, and then June I was absent when the drill happened, and nobody told me. So I'm like, well, now I got to stay on watch for it in case it happens, you know? So I did get the accommodation, but it was like, I didn't get like a full proper accommodation. I'm like, well, what do I do with this? I mean, it helped just because it got me away, but it was also kind of a subtle thing at the time that I was realizing that the issue wasn't so much, you know, like at first I was like, oh, maybe I'm just really sensitive to fire alarms and loud noise. And I realized that that's not the issue, you know. Not that noise doesn't bother me. I guess it's more so like, it's like I want to save stuff because I don't want to, I feel like I'm being like too scattery right now. Like I'm just trying to like lay out the land, you know.
Yeah, that's okay. If I can interject here.
Go for it.
I want to tell you on two hands. One hand, my heart breaks for you because as I'm listening to what you're sharing with us, which are intimate details of what you're going through personally, and secondly, I have a lot of admiration for you because you're doing exactly that, sharing and being so open about this. And I really commend you for having the courage to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
No, you really, really need to know that what you're doing is very courageous. And I hope our listeners out there find what he's doing, you know, that you find it inspiring, that perhaps you too feel compelled to want to share your insights on what's going on, because clearly you're not alone, right? And to be one of the first ones to speak up like this. I mean, you're very open, and
I've never
it's
seen,
great.
It's like I've never seen anyone talk about autism in the way I experience it. I'm like, you know, I gotta get my story out there. Like someone has to. I can't be the only one like this. Like, surely someone out there doesn't get it too, and like maybe what I articulate will make it click for someone. So that's why I really want to get out. But I guess I'll get onto like, I'm just trying to think because I want to stay in like part one of just this like context, and then part two where I'm like where I realize like what actually like what my autism actually looks like. So, so then I graduated high school. I started community college, and like, you know, that was that. And community college was just a bunch of like weird background noise, and like that's a whole nother can of worms. But long story short, I dropped out. But anyways, so I mean, I don't want to get there, but how do I say it? But I guess therapy, and like I remember community college was like not really working, and I was struggling there. And I think my second semester I was struggling with some more stuff, and it was weird because I was doing my school work fully online at this point, right? Like, you know, I was like, well, they have the fire drills at community college. I'm like, well, I can't go to classes now because in case one happens, I can't let this bother me, you know, anymore. And it was, I say like the threat model just went straight from point A to a new one. It was like I had one problem, now I got a new one. And what it was I remember in college, like, what was it? I was in like a public speaking class, and I remember checking through like the course syllabus. And I remember seeing this like exam at the end, and it was like, oh, like requires lockdown browser. I'm like, what on earth is that? And like that looks shady. I'm like, I don't know if that is. I don't know if I trust that. I'm like, that just sounds like not comfortable. And it went away, but then it came back at the end of the class, and he's like, oh, like we have to use this for the exam. And I was like, it's like, I don't know. I believe it's like our proctoring software that like a lot of schools use for like exams, and like I didn't know how to word it at the time, but I was like, this is a lot, like webcams and like being on camera, and like, you know, like they have you like scan your room, and I'm like, well, my room is so personal and like so like aligned to like, you know, my own stuff, and like it felt like being exposed to my like, you know, like having my own world like exposed to like anyone. And like even, you know, stuff like, oh, like what everyone has to do, oh, you know, it's for this, and I'm like, this isn't helping, you know, like this isn't making it easier. So
But yet today you're okay being on camera here?
Oh, I don't care now. It's different, I think. I guess it's the difference of like surveillance versus just I'm talking. It's weird. It's I guess I say like I think autonomy and like feeling like not stuck is a big problem for me, and I want to save that for later just because I think it clicks a lot into place. But like,
well, I don't know what you were pursuing in school, but I would venture to guess that I can see you having a future in public speaking and being involved in the autism world to helping others cope with what you can clearly articulate.
Yeah. As for school,
I'm enamored with you. I think what you're doing is wonderful.
I'm gonna be honest, I dropped out a couple weeks ago just because it was to a point where I was stuck in school, and I just didn't see a life path that involved being in schools, and it was just something needed to change. And I just ultimately was like, this is too much. I need to get out of here. But
all right, a break is fine.
Yeah.
You know? But maybe a different path.
Yeah,
but you're a very bright young man.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you should pursue it when you're ready, and maybe a different avenue.
Yeah, and let me think what else too. So I'm like, this was like my first semester of college, and I was like, and then my second semester hit, and at this point, if like I felt like I was just running my own like accessibility office. Like I was scheduling my courses accordingly. I was checking out like syllabus, trying to like figure out what courses might have been a problem for me, which ones weren't. And, like it was a lot, like with like registration, and that became a problem just because that was so stressful. And I was like, you know what, like I should probably go get a diagnosis. 'Cause at this point, I didn't have one, but I knew something wasn't right. So I went for the diagnosis. I want to say in like it was a while to get in, honestly. I think I started like the end of January, and I went in for an assessment in like early May. Like it took a good 3 months to get in, and I got
25.
24. So
24.
about 2 years ago chronologically.
Okay. Now, did you make this decision on your own, or did you refer with your mom and dad?
I made the decision on my own, but I knew like they would be ready for the diagnosis when I was, and even my therapist too was like, yeah, I could refer you someplace where you get diagnosed. And so I went through like the whole like intake form and questionnaire and stuff, and they're like, oh, sorry, just like choked up, but they're like, oh, like we think maybe anxiety, but like they're like, oh, probably anxiety, but maybe autism. And I was like, I guess I'll do the anxiety thing. But then I was like, but then like I had this little thing. I'm like, man, so, like the autism's like right there. Like this could be like everything. And I was so afraid of not getting the diagnosis or thinking like I was just doing it because it's like the trend or whatever. And I was like, you know what, like. I was like, I'll just get the autism assessment. What do I have to lose, So I went through with it, and it took a while for the assessment, just because it was such a long wait list. And I went through with the diagnosis, and came back and obviously I met the criteria for autism. But then I also got autism, and I got generalized anxiety disorder as like a diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And I remember like just feeling a bit confused like at the paperwork right away, because it was like like I mentioned, like the sleep stuff and how I would stay up like late at night into like school, and like that was put on, but it was put as more of like a fear thing, as less than like I'm just trying to keep myself stable thing. If that makes sense. Like it wasn't that I was too nervous to fall asleep. It was just that I was brute forcing through like being exhausted, just because it was keeping like stuff predictable and like stable. What else?
Did you feel that staying awake would slow down the inevitable, which is to go to school?
It was like deliberately like slowing down time and keeping it from being like a sudden jolt to getting up and going to school. And it's just insane to think like I did all that just pre-diagnostic, didn't know what was happening, just knew this works weirdly. It's like intuitive to a sense, but that's why like even when I started like doing like really deeper digging at it, it wasn't like I was making new insights. I was just taking what I had, like I'm wrapping up with like a neat bow, So I give that, and with my diagnosis and stuff, like I got the anxiety diagnosis, and that just it was weird. Like it never felt right, a generalized anxiety diagnosis. So I'm like, well, it doesn't feel generalized. It feels like a bunch of like very specific pressure points that won't go away and just bleed on to the rest of my life, And I was like, so that doesn't feel right,
That's
like
a very profound way to put it.
And I'm like, well, I'm not socially anxious. Like I'm on a podcast right now in front of 3 cameras, like, and I'm like, oh, cool, I'm going on a podcast. Mom was like, I remember my mom, like right after I dropped out of school, she was like, what's next? And I was like, you know what, like, I don't know. I mean, I have ideas, obviously. That's another thing too, is I didn't want to leave school till I was like, you know what, like I need to figure out a path. Otherwise, I'm going to be, I'm like, I wanted a path to go on. I just didn't want to, do it just on a whim. Like, oh, like
good for you.
So,
So what do you figure is next for you?
Honestly, I'm just keeping my paths open right now. Like, I'm doing my own things. I've been, looking into other opportunities. I'm just trying to keep everything like, I guess self-paced and like on like, how do I say it? I guess closer like freelancing and stuff. Like I found that that's like my sweet spot, where it's like, I feel like, like I have access to keeping myself stable. I have my time. I have, just if I want, if something to change, something needs to change. Something needs, it's when I have stability and structure that I'm kind of imposing on myself and that I'm in control of. I honestly thrive, right? Like, like
that's beautiful.
I've done long bursts of work on my own, and I found that like the work I was doing for myself was objectively longer than like it was for like my school work, and I was just more enthusiastic about doing the work for myself, even if it was like if like I think because my last semester was when I started like messing around with like doing my own stuff, and in the past fall semester, so this was like months ago, honestly, and like my how do I say this
your self-reflection is amazing.
Thank you.
It really is, at how you can assess yourself and then put it into action.
Yeah, and so my last semester, I took like one course because I was just so like and out of it, and I was like, well, I was supposed to graduate a year ago, and I'm still not done, and I still not even on route to graduate. I'm like, this is such a hot mess. And what I found, like, I was asynchronous. I was doing weekly courses, and I'm like, my courses are taking an hour, but like what I'm doing is like multiple hours a week, and I'm like, I'm having more fun just doing that, even though it was more work. And I'm like, this isn't adding up, you know? And I remember like November, like I was just seeing success with like what I was doing on my own. And I was like, how do I say it? I just hit a point where I was like, well, course registration's coming up. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. I was like, I'm done. And I was like, you know what? Like parents aren't really letting me drop out. I'm like, what if I just stop going? What if I just stop showing up? So my last like 8 weeks of the semester, I just stopped showing up for classes. I mean, it was online, but I was just like, I don't want to attend this. And I was like, Meh, get this out of here. And they were like, assignment due? I was like, no, I'm okay. I was like, no. And you know how good that felt? I was like, oh, like, yeah, hell yeah.
Now, does mom know any of this?
No, she knows all about it.
Oh, now she does. Okay.
No, but you know,
as long as she's not learning about it just right now.
No, I told her a while ago, but I was getting the sweats. Like I was like, you know, this feels so good, and you know, it was how do I say it? Like I didn't know how to articulate it, and I didn't want to sound like a hot mess when I did articulate it, just because I was like, this could backfire big time. So I remember Thanksgiving, I was just like, we were going to our relative's house, and I remember sitting in the car. And like I just felt like not sick, like I just like I was like, I failed school, I'm weird, I have this diagnosis, nothing makes sense, like what is wrong with me? Like just I was so helplessly stuck in just like what is happening with me, and
if I can say,
yes.
interrupted,
yeah,
there's nothing weird about you, nothing.
Oh.
I have kids your age, they're going through the same issues you're going through. There is nothing weird about you.
I know. It's just, even me, I'm like, I'm not weird anymore. It's just, as soon as I was like, oh, this makes sense. I'm like, oh, I don't have to worry. This isn't weird. This is just how I'm wired, you know? It was just, when you don't have the words for it, I think that's another big thing too with autism I found is I've seen people who have similar like experiences to me. It's just, I don't think they have the words for it. And it's like, you know, I've seen people who have adjacent experiences to what I experience on the daily. And it's like, oh my God, like this is literally what I experience. And it's like, there's just like not much vocabulary for it. And I just feel so bad, like for people, you know, because it's like I just feel horrible. And,
so if you had to change it, what would you do?
I guess this is what I did now was I was like, you know what, like at this point I knew AI was a thing. And I was like, you know what, like, let me go on. Cause I'm like, here's the thing is like, I just needed a place where, like, I knew it wasn't real. I knew there was no social risk. I knew I could say whatever I needed to and just belt out everything, like, without feeling, like, socially, like, watched. Like, is this going to get judged? Is this going to get misinterpreted? Is this going to get, you know, criticized? Is this going to get, like, weird looks, you know? And so I'm like, I just went like zero filter, just balls to the wall on AI. Like just like I say, like I use AI a lot. Look at mom laughing over there because she knows. I use AI as like a soundboard. Like I throw stuff at it, it makes sense of it, and I'm like, okay, let's fine tune it, and then let's translate it so that way I can tell people about it, you know. And that's like immensely clutch for me, you know. So what I found right away was like, you know, in like a week I was like, oh my God, like this makes so much sense, you know. So I guess the way like what I've kind of made with AI is that I found I have like two big like issues that kind of everything ties to a degree. And the big one that's always been there is just that I'm very, 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 very prediction driven. It's, you know, it's not so much like I know with autism, like you hear about like sensitivity to sound, you hear about that. That's a real form of autism. It's just not the one that I have. And when I realized that wasn't my issue, I was like, oh, that makes sense, you know, like, with like the balloons and the fire drills, it wasn't so much like that they were loud when they were happening. It was usually like, it was worse when they weren't happening and I couldn't tell when they're going to happen. When they happen, I was like, oh, like, you know, it was still loud. It was still overwhelming, but it was like, okay, like I could, you know, I still be like shaking and like, you know, just sweating just because it was so much at that point. But like, it was like a down ramp from there. It was usually like the worst was like before it. And it was, you know, like it sounds a lot like anticipatory anxiety, and I don't, it's weird because that's when I'm like, you know, like I don't really respond to like, oh, it's not going to hurt you. Oh, it's not going to do this, it's not going to do that. Like it was just like, it just felt like tense and like just ooh, in the body. Like, that's why. Like, even like one of the crazy things I didn't realize was autism isn't just the brain; it's the whole nervous system. Like, nobody told me that. Like, whoa, And like that's when I'm like, oh, like that's why like a lot of stuff is just in the whole body for me. It's not just the brain. I'm like, oh, this is my whole nervous system. Just being attuned like this, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So that was a lot for me, and so it's how prediction driven I am, but also I guess I call it like a missing handoff, so to speak. But a lot of times when you have like with kids, right? Like like I guess if a kid's crying, usually like what do? Like you don't really you wouldn't like try to reassure them. You would just hold them and just like coddle them because they won't really like if a young baby's crying, you're not going to try and like emotionally reassure them through it. You're usually just going to cradle them, right? Mm-hmm. And I say it's when people are young, I believe is you dominantly perceive the world through what's called like bottom-up processing, which is, how do I say it? It's, I guess the body responds before the brain does, right? So I say an example of that would be like if I when someone like you flinch because someone mm-hmm. It's like, ooh, like that's kind of example of like bottom-up processing. And I think the difference is that like when you grow up and you mature a bit more, you kind of shift more to like, I guess, more top-down stuff, which is where your bigger issues become more emotional, not that I can't have emotional issues, just that like I still kind of like lead with a lot of that like bottom-up processing of the world, where a lot of my stuff is not so much like emotionally driven as much as it's just my nervous system being just very prediction driven and just just responding better to like like how do I say it? It's like I say like with the balloons, like my best example is like if someone could tell me all they want, it's not going to hurt you. That's not going to that doesn't tell my nervous system like it doesn't really like I guess regulate it to say like okay, like we don't have to watch for this anymore. Like how do I say it? I guess it's a lot of it just feels like I guess like a hypervigilance to a degree. Like just like what's next, what's gonna happen, and just always like monitoring for like what could happen, and just a very like predictability driven over anything else really. And when I found out that was my issue, I was like, oh my God, like this makes so much sense. Like, and even like a lot of like stuff with autism just started to like kind of click more. And I was like, wow, like, just stuff that tracked from like childhood up to like when I was an adult, like fully coherent from like, when I was a kid to like all the way up to like, now that I'm like 20 and I still experience the same thing just under like different guises. And I'm like, wow, But that was like the crazy part to me, was just everything was coherent. It just didn't have a correct explanation. And I mean, I don't say that to like blame therapy. Like my point of this isn't like psychiatry bad. Like that's not my point at all. It's just to say like even just the shame for me. Like I could probably go out there and explain stuff and someone make sense of it. It's just a lot of it just feels so like I guess strange on like a base level. But then like when you pull the curtain, it's like, oh, that makes sense.
So what advice would you give other children out there, other kids your age, who perhaps haven't been diagnosed yet and are feeling the way you feel?
I would say for one, at least go get a diagnosis first. Like please don't self-diagnose yourself. Don't ask AI to self-diagnose you. That's not going to get you anywhere. I say go get the diagnosis. Go get that. I mean, I also don't want to sound like vehemently like pro AI, just because again, it can make mistakes. I've caught it being like a little bit finicky at times. So it's like you gotta be careful with it, of course. Like you hear horror stories about people who who end up having tragedy happen because they AI. So there's very much a risk to it. You just gotta be really careful with it and kind of just always critically think like is it overstating? Is it is it speaking too much in like an abstract? So there's kind of a limit to like being careful with it and kind of pushing back where you can, just because I found it is generally good at like taking like pushback. Like if you're like, oh, this isn't true, it's like, okay, that's fine, So it definitely can get a bit like over babyish with that and like like overseeing stuff. So you kind of have to watch. But like honestly, just this sense of like I could talk about things and they're coherent and there's actually really like usually a big underlying pattern that kind of ties everything together and like it has like an existing phenomenon tied to it. That's big. Like that's huge.
Right,
so,
of course.
Even it's just weird because it's like, some stuff is just so theoretical, like still, like just because there's not like there's proper vocabulary, but then it's like, it's just like a strange phenomenon, like at least internally, that I'm like, oh, that, like it just makes sense. Like once I click it together and I'm like, wait a minute, like this is something that's tracked to childhood and it works. And I'm like, oh, okay,
Right. So now what would you say to the doctors that are out there? Because I don't know if you were misdiagnosed or just missed being diagnosed
Yeah.
for so many years because you didn't get it until you were 18. What would you say to them in terms of if a younger kid comes to them to be more astute or more aware of what that child is going through? Like, did they listen to you? Did you project what you were feeling to them? Because you're very well articulated.
Yeah, I have a weird example of like, so I don't, have you ever heard like the phenomenon of like people with autism and just loving like weighted blankets? Is this familiar to you?
No.
So I believe what the reason is, because I happen to kind of fall under this, but what that means for me is so with autism sometimes is weighted blankets tend to be extremely regulating for the system, just because they either dampen how much intensity one is experiencing, or they kind of like force the body into like, like we're here, we're accounted for, there's nothing left to like track for. And for me, who like can't tell my body that intuitively, that's very, very, very intense, and so like, I guess like, how do I say this? Like, I kind of always I like plush toys. Like I really, I have like my plush toys at home, and it's not so much just like I like plush toys, but like I have like a couple like big ones at home. Like I love those Squishmallows and stuff because they're like huge, And I remember kind of trying to articulate it in like my diagnosis thing, and I'm like, like I have this plush at home and I sleep with it, and it helps me, and it feels nice, and it keeps me, like. I didn't know how to word it because again, I didn't have the vocabulary to say, oh, I have a plush at home that helps me regulate. I just didn't have the word for that. And it just didn't get like marked down on my diagnosis like at all. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, granted, again, like it's just, I guess I don't know if it could always be because autism is just so like new in the big picture of things, right? Like, I don't want to criticize doctors or say like, oh, I'm smarter than doctors, or oh, I'm better than doctors. Like, that's not the point at all of what I'm saying. I'm trying to articulate this really carefully just because I don't want to sound like.
Would you feel perhaps they weren't pulling it out of you if you didn't know how to articulate it?
I think
that they didn't pull it out of you for the explanation to really understand you.
I think it was that, and it was also just shame. Like, just this is weird. I'm weird. This might not even be an awesome thing. This might be like some weird me thing. Like, it didn't click, if that makes sense. And that's kind of where like. I just felt like weird about myself, and I'm like, well, this is weird, and you don't have the vocabulary for it, so it's like, well, I guess it's just a comfort, and you're just like, this isn't so much comfort, this is just regulation, and like how I kind of keep myself at a baseline, and even like just realizing like, oh my god, this is working, how do I like? I'm trying to think, like just realizing like when I regulate, and now that I know what keeps me, regulated, especially like when a problem I have is just, how do I say this, I give it a good example just because it's such a common place for it to be stressful, but the airport, you go to the airport, that's a lot for me, I could do it, it's just overwhelming, but generally, like, one of the tougher things for me is specifically delays when there's no, like, endpoint, right? Like, a delay could be, we were in the airport in, like, May last year, and we had a delay that was, like, I think, like, lightning struck the plane or something. Mom's laughing again. But, I remember, like, I was, like, starting to get like upset and stuff, and like like I was just getting like snappy, and I noticed I do that too. Like it's like it kind of hits to a point where where it becomes like too much, and I become a bit like angry and like and I realized that was because especially now in retrospect, now that I know what to do, I'm like, well, I didn't really do a good job at like keeping myself regulated, so then like I ended up like bursting on people, just I didn't mean what I was saying, I just had to get it out somewhere, like. I
get that.
So what I found was this was in May. I mean, this was before I knew, and then I'll use December next because I just traveled. But we got delayed. But then like as soon as we got the delay, even though it was at 6 a.m, so we were stuck in the airport for 6 hours, I handled that fine because I knew what the endpoint was, And in December we were in the airport. We were on the plane for like I think a good like 10 minutes or so, and I sat there. I'm like, for me, like I found that. I guess like there's always this sense of like requirement to like subtly regulate myself. That way I prevent like it's not so much like a bring down tool as much as it's like kind of keep me at like a baseline tool, if that makes sense. And what I found was like I was sitting on this plane and we hadn't taken off for like 10 minutes by now. And usually by now me with my mom's laughing all that because she knew I would have been like, oh, when's the plane taking off? When's the plane taking off? I would have been going with it. But I just sat there the whole time because I was just keeping myself like regulated with what I knew worked. I just sat there and I didn't feel like stressed. I didn't feel bad. I was like, oh, we're doing this. Okay. I remember what else too? We went to, we were in Disney World a couple weeks ago for like a trip. And we were at the sci-fi dining theater. I don't know if you know what that is in Disney World. And we were sitting and it was taking a little while for our waiter to come. And I'm like, you know what? Like, and I kind of just kept, as I say, like now that I know, like, okay, if I keep myself regulated, I won't get upset. This will be much more manageable for me to kind of do things, you know. So it took us, I think, 20 minutes for the waiter to come, and like the whole time I'm just sitting there, like, oh, like, you know, I was keeping myself like just, you know, regulated and just kind of, and it's crazy too, like when it works, like it isn't just like, oh, like I feel good. It's, you know, like it's complete, like, how's it? I guess like chills in like the body, like it's like, that's why I say it's like a whole, like it's not just the brain, it's the whole nerve system, you know. So
Now, these are things you found to do for yourself?
this is stuff that I was doing before, but it just felt too weird and like too taboo and just kind of like, why is this a thing? But then I was like, oh, this is just how my nervous system is trying to keep itself regulated. I was like, oh, I should just let it do its thing then, you know? So it was more so just, it was, like I say, it wasn't like I found out about like things online and then just adopted them. It was more so like I had like stuff with no vocabulary. And then like, it was like, oh, this actually is kind of how your system regulates. And I was like, oh, I guess I could use this then, you know, like, you know, it was more so just finding an answer for something that was for like a phenomenon, at least interpersonally, that I had, and I just didn't know what it was. And then like I got an answer for it, and I'm like, oh, this makes sense. And I just adapted it, and it just worked, you know. It is crazy just how intuitive like it all was. Like, you know, like I knew my approaches to how I regulate worked, and that they made me feel like calmer and stuff. I just didn't have the words for why. It just felt weird because I'm like, well, this is strange. Why am I thinking of this to keep myself regulated, you know? I guess I'll give another example, just because this is like another thing with me too, is I guess another phenomenon with autism that I've seen is, I guess, like people with autism tend to very much like cartoon characters. I don't know if you've ever heard of this too. It's what I like, for me at least, the reason is just that like when I regulate, I always say like it's not so much like, it's a completely different category than social stuff, right? Like I have my social needs, but I also have like what I need to regulate, and those are two different, very different like categories of like things, right? And with cartoon characters, what I believe is the reason why, or at least for me, is they like, I guess it's just they're very like predictable, you know. Like there's nothing to watch with a character. They're usually easy to like interpret, like what their expressions, why they are the way they are, you know, what they feel, you know. It just kind of reduces like all the guesswork I'm doing, you know, right? Like socially it's weird. Like I'm not so much like, for me, autism socially, it could be for other people, but not for me. But it's not so much that I just don't understand social situations as much as it's like, sometimes I'm a bit worried about like not knowing what's coming next in a social interaction. So I tend to withdraw from social interactions, especially like unfamiliar ones. Like, you know, if we go to a party, usually I'm like a bit more like laggy behind, but then like once I'm a bit more ramped up, I'm like, I could talk a bit more, you know, and with like you know, so I'm like this, you know, how do I say, I guess like I have, like, you know, and it like when I was a kid, like it was just this always like this thing of like just thinking of like fictional characters who I kind of like stuck to, and just like feeling like just regulating through just thinking of them, because they just kind of were like something predictable that like I could kind of think of, and like I would, you know, it would help me regulate, just because it's like, you know, oh, this thing, you know, is predictable, it's, you know, and that was always weird, because I'm like, well, what on earth is this? Like, like why am I so clung to like cartoon characters at like 20, you know, 18, 19, 20. And I'm like, you know, AI was like, oh, this makes full sense, you know, given your profile. And I was like, oh my God, it really does. And it's just such a weird concept, just because I've seen, you know, like I've seen this stuff, like, and it's crazy too. I remember seeing a research piece a while ago, like over a year ago, before I even went on AI. It was like, I think they did a study of like people with autism, without autism, and what they found was they did like, I guess like a study like where they show you like images of like the eyes, and they're like guess what this person's like expression is, and they found that people with autism, I think, outpaced the people without autism, and just did better overall. I was like, wow, that's interesting, you know, and you know, I was like, that's crazy, you know, so.
Do you feel because they're more in tune with that sensory?
I wonder. I'm not sure, because the way I always see it is like, for me, it's whenever I read like stuff socially, it's always kind of a sense of like kind of putting pieces together and being like, oh, this is what this person's feeling, you know. Like I don't have I don't know what it's like to not have autism, obviously, but like for me, it kind of feels like reading, like, you know, like I'll give an example of like my mom, just because, you know, there she's in the corner. Hi, Mom.
We're going to have to get Mom on air.
We got to get Mom on air.
Because this is such a great conversation. You are sharing so much, but there's another dynamic, and it's the mom's dynamic. The mom's, what she's going through, watching her son go through this, which I can relate to, and she's got an amazing story herself that she needs to share with the world.
Yeah.
Right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Like, let's talk a minute about your mom.
You want her to come on?
Not just yet.
Okay.
What
Oh, Mom, you want to talk about her?
Yeah. How strong is your mom?
Oh, she's strong.
right?
Look at her, she's already crying.
Is she not one of the strongest people you know?
Yeah, of course.
Right? She's
Yeah, I know.
amazing. She's absolutely amazing, your mom.
No, she's been through a lot this year. She's been through, and I feel bad. I'm like, because I've been more open with her about like what I went through as a kid and just what I experienced on the daily. And she's like, I tell her all the time, like, look, like she's like, oh, I feel horrible, like, I feel so. She just a lot of guilt, and I understand that so much. But I'm like, look, like. She wanted to help me so bad, like like she told me like, oh, I was so like I just wanted to take you, I just want to make school work for you. I just want to make things work for you. And I wanted to make, and I'm like, the fact that you were willing to do that is evident that the issue was never you. Like, get that out of your head. I know
Right.
you can't just do it overnight. Like, it's kind of you have to remember, like, But I'm like, I get that, but the issue itself was more so just fear and pressure from the outside. Like schools, it's you're kind of it's like, oh, gotta go to school, you gotta go to school, and it's like. It's a big leap to just be like, well, like, what if my kid is suffering in school? What then, And it's hard, honestly. Like, that's a hard position to be in. And, and I say to her, like, the fact that you're willing to sit with me and sit and, like, you're basically joining me in the ambiguity and just what's going to happen next of life that I've been sitting through for the past 20 years. So just buckle up. We got this.
What a great perception of everything.
I'm like, buckle up. We got this. We'll be fine. But,
But I think you get a lot of your strength from your mom.
Yeah, I know.
Which is wonderful.
I have a funny insight too, just because I was like, this makes so much sense. But I'm like weirdly good at like getting her like, because sometimes she has her moments. I don't want to say what they are, just because But sometimes she just has like her moments where she really like gets into it and just. You could tell, like, at least for me, like I said, that's kind of with my mom. Like, people are like, oh, like, if you could read people, how's it autism? But for me, it's like the opposite, because it's like, for me, like, mom's just, I know what she is like when she's happy, but I know so I could easily tell when she's not happy, just because I'm so attuned to, like, how she is when she's happy, that, like, she's kind of like a light switch, honestly. But, like, so I'm, like, right away, I'll be like, what's wrong? Like, just tell me, like, what happened. I'm like, and then I'll start apologizing, like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't, it couldn't even, like, it might not even be me, I just don't know. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, I don't know what I did, but I'm sorry, but.
So not only are you an amazing guy, but you're an amazing son.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like, I've caught her in, like, her trenches, so to speak, and it's so funny, because I say to her, like, weirdly enough, a lot of how I regulate with my own autism and like a lot of like the ways I kind of resolve things myself translates very, very well onto people with anxiety. Mm-hmm. Like, so a lot of times what I'll do is, if I catch her, I'll sit with, I'm like, look, I'll hold onto her hands and I'll be like, look, just do a breathing exercise. I'm like, we're not going to do anything. You're going to breathe through this and then we're going to talk. And then I'm like, you're going to breathe, you're going to ground yourself. And then we're going to move on to like addressing things, And, I let her breathe and I sit with her. I'm like, okay, like, is this happening, And then
you're going to make an amazing spouse one day.
And a lot of times, my mom will be like, like she'll just, and then I'm like, okay, like, what's the problem? And then she'll tell me her problem. And I'm like, okay, like, how do I guess I'll give an example just because I think this is kind of a good one. But so my mom, she got breast cancer a while ago, and my Nona, she has pancreatic cancer, and that's
oh my goodness.
Yeah. And she's kind of like in it with it, and it's been a weird experience, honestly, with her. And I think back in November, like they kind of found like it kind of came back, and mom wasn't a fan of that, especially because she just got the all clear that like she's cancer free,
right.
Which is big news. But that sent her. This was like chronologically, it was the pancreatic cancer came back, but then like a month later she got the all clear on her cancer. So it's kind of like this was before it, but that
well,
she
it
was
sounds like your family needs a win. You deserve a win.
And she was like, and I remember she was just. We were in Florida, and it was just me and her because my dad comes up to go to work, and then my grandparents, they have to they can't be there all the time because my grandfather works. Grandma, she's well, my grandma, she's the best. I hope she's watching though. So hi, Grandma. I say I'm a big fan of Grandma.
Grandma?
Oh yeah, no, I love her. But my mom, right? So I remember she was just completely like out of it, and I was like, it was the two of us at home, and I sat with her, I did the breathing, and I said, look, like, I said, are you her? I said, are you her? I'm like, because what she's going through is not what you're going through, and I'm like, if you compare and you try to like do this, you're gonna send yourself for a spiral, and you're gonna go like completely out of it. And I remember even like
The insight of this
and
kid.
this past week, she
He's only 20.
about a week ago, she go for a hysterectomy. She had a hysterectomy a couple days ago. Aren't you so glad I'm telling your life story? Hi, Mom. But
A couple of days ago, and she's here in the studio.
Yeah, no,
Is she not a warrior? Oh
yeah,
my
no.
God.
But so there was a snowstorm this weekend, right? So she was worried sick about it, and I'm like, I get it, but like, and she, you know, she's very much like a everything for a reason person, and I get that. But I said, look, Mom, like I get that that's how you process things sometimes, but like, the more you try to link things and try to make sense of things that sometimes just life happens, like the more you're going to try it, the more you're going to spiral, the more you're just going to like sit there and you're just going to ruminate and you're going to, I say, rumination is the killer. That's what I say. I mean, it's like, I feel like I'm flip-flopping right now, but rumination is such
you're not.
Rumination is such a killer. Oh my God. Like I say, like, back in April, so chronologically, I was in 2 therapies. I was in my regular therapist which was one-on-one, and I was in a group therapy for a little bit too, specifically for adult men who had autism. And I left the therapy group just because it just wasn't really what I expected it to be. Like I kind of wanted to make friends, and I just realized I kind of learned like autism's not a common link for me to kick it off with people. Not that that means people with autism are wrong or bad, just that like, you know,
I get
it
it.
just tends to not, especially it just wasn't really like the right place for me. And
You have a group of friends though, right?
not right now, but honestly, I guess my family.
Yeah.
Like socially, it's weird. Like I have my family. I haven't had like. I had that online friend group where the one who I said who helped me, like who kind of
Right.
pointed me towards autism, but I left that group in like 2023, right when I started college, and so I haven't really had like a true friend group in a while, and it's like weirdly blissful. Like maybe like I'm kind of just playing it by the edge of my seat right now. Like if I make new friends, it happens. If I don't, it does. You know, it's just whatever. You know, it's just weirdly peaceful, just because I've had so much time to like sit with myself and learn like who I am, who I'm not, but more importantly, you know, just what I want to do, what I don't want to do, just figuring things out, you know. And so I haven't really had any true friends in a while. You know, I know Mom's friends, you know, so I kind of have like friends by proxy, you know. That's just no, Mom's, you know. So it's, but
And she has an awesome group of friends, so that means you do too.
yeah.
So that's great.
And with therapy, I think they're watching, so I hope they're watching. Hi. So with therapy, I left that too. I think I left in like I remember I got cavities filled, and I didn't want to go in because I was out of it completely. Like my mouth was sore, and I was like, I don't want to go talk for an hour, and so I canceled my appointment. And then I was sitting one day, and I'm like, I don't think I want to do therapy anymore. And at this point, this was April last year. And at this point, I hadn't registered for my college courses because I didn't want to do it, and like I was hiding it from my parents that I didn't want to register, and I was horrified of registering. So that was, you know, I was in the trenches, but I was also like, I'm doing so much better now that like I'm not really like. It was weird. Like I was just moving on and like kind of trying to be more optimistic about things while also being like stuck. It was such a weird dichotomy for a bit, and I left therapy because I'm like, you know, not at all ashamed therapy, just that like, you know. A lot of I think the issue was just that like one, she was an autism specialist, like so I can't really expect her to know my problems. 2, I was kind of starting to hide my issues more, like again like a lot of like, you know, with like cartoon characters and how I regulate, and like, you know, the like school and why that was becoming harder was just stuff that I wasn't really talking about in therapy, you know. And what, you know, how do I say it, like it just I wasn't making progress. And I say rumination's the killer because it really is. Like, you know, like therapy, every guy just come in and rehash like, oh, school was so hard, this was so hard, friends were so hard, you know, like this friend group, it's been so long since I left them, and you know I feel so bad for, you know, like what happened, and school was so hard. And it was just like that loop of like, I'm talking about this but we're not moving on from it, and I feel like I'm in like a new loop of school here. So it was just I just felt like stuck honestly stuck. And so I'm like, therapy is not really helping anymore. So I decided to leave, and that was a right call. Even if it took a while for me to really like attune to like who I am as a person, you know. Like I said, it was this weird area from like April to like November, October, November, where I was like, you know.
Well, you strike me the type of guy that if you feel that you need therapy again, you'll go.
Yeah, no, I go back
You
to
wouldn't
therapy.
be forced.
I go back to therapy, honestly. Granted, do I think I need it right now? Absolutely not. I'm doing, you know, I've got my problems, and what as I say, it's not that like I'm immune to anxiety because of my autism. Anxiety is just generally not like my primary like driver, you know. Like I think that's the thing too, is like I noticed like it could have been because of the way they kind of formatted my diagnosis, but a lot of what I was told from my diagnosis papers that I got and like the way therapy did it was autism was seen more as like background noise, while like it was more so like anxiety was like the lead driver, and that's not really true for me, right? Like, you know, once I flip out the tables and I'm like, oh, like, you know, oh, it's not actually, you know, anxiety. It's more so autism, and anxiety sometimes just shows up if it gets like too much, you know, like even just like the amount of confusion I had, like, you know, I remember, what was it? So I guess like one other behavior I have is I have a tendency to like, I call it like just loop closing. Like, you know, like I just want to close like uncertainty, like just because one, I'm more prone to it just for like random things, but two, like the fact that I get a bit like on it about it. So I remember I was telling my therapist about like, you know, how I, with food a lot, I tend to get a little bit apprehensive with food, you know, just because I'm worried I'm gonna get food poisoning, honestly, which is kind of, you know, it doesn't come from anywhere. I never had food poisoning. It's just it could happen, and I don't want it to happen. And I'll show my mom my food. I'm like, look at my food right now. I'm like, is it okay to eat? And she's like, yeah, it's fine. And like for a while, like we didn't know it wasn't. She was like, she'd get upset because she's like, why are you criticizing food? I'm like, no, I just need to know it's okay to eat. Like I'm not trying to be mean. I'm
Well,
just
is it food that she made?
Yeah, but,
She's Italian. Of course, it's going to be good.
yeah, but you know, like I check the food a lot, like, you know, and you know, what was it? And this is like, you know, and as soon as I took a bite or two, like it would just, I'd be like, oh, this is fine, I can eat this. And this was like textbook like autism behavior for me, just didn't have a label, and it was just really confusing. I remember my therapist was like, you know, like, oh, maybe this is OCD. I was like, what? I was like, wait, what? She was like, I remember right before, like, because in May, I remember I was going to see like my evaluator for like, you know, my just to kind of understand my diagnosis a little bit more, and my therapist was like, you know, like, oh, I was like, should I ask for anything? And she was like, oh, like, I think, you know, maybe you have some obsessive compulsive symptoms. Like, why don't you get that? I was like, sure. So then, like, I had this big, like, list of, like, autism, trauma, anxiety, excessive compulsive symptoms, just this whole like list of things, and now it's just autism. Like it's so consolidated, and just instead of like these weird like pseudo labels that don't really make complete sense, it's just one big framework, and like that's like delicious for me, you know. It's like, oh, finally, you know.
That's a great way to put it.
It's like, oh my God, finally.
Yeah. So at this point, I would love to invite his mom to the table to finish the podcast, because we'd love to get mom's perception on everything, and if she could share her story. I'm a bit biased. I am so inspired by this woman, and you're going to be inspired too when you hear her story. Well, so today I am so excited about our show, and why? Because today we have Alessandro, who's on our show, who has autism. For years, Jar of Hope has helped families with Duchenne and children with autism, but we've never had anybody who can speak firsthand about what it's like living with autism. And we have his mom, his beautiful mom sitting next to him, Danielle, and it's a pleasure now to have you on the show. Your son, I have to tell you, he's well-spoken. I think he's very intelligent, and it was an honor to talk to you, and you have such a huge heart. It's just amazing. And you're light years ahead of your age,
Yes.
I have to tell you.
Absolutely.
You know, and look at him, he's beaming that you're sitting next to him.
That's my sweetest boy.
Well, she's gonna cry.
I
I
am. I
love
probably
it.
will. I
Yeah, she's
probably
gonna
will.
cry.
5 times.
I
Yeah.
love it. So these two have an amazing story, not individually and together. So I'll let you introduce your mom and share some of her story as you were
You
before.
could do it. You go.
You want me to
You
introduce
go.
myself?
Yeah, no, you do better than I can.
I'm Danielle. So who am I? I'm the mom that missed my son having autism for 20 years of his life. And I hope that his story can help other parents understand when you think things are just a little normal, or that's just the way they are, or when they become so strong in their own selves to be able to cover and hide things that you don't even realize, and that you can only hope that they'll still love you, and in turn help you in ways that I could never imagine this sweet soul.
Oh,
being
you're just a
able to
lucky
be.
duck.
I am
You're
a
just
lucky
you're just the
duck. I
luckiest
am a
duck
lucky
ever.
duck.
You're just a
Well, if
lucky
I'm-
duck.
But you always call me a silly goose.
Yeah, you're like.
Am I a silly goose or a lucky duck?
Maybe you're both.
That's good.
Depends on the day, right?
Yeah, no, it depends on the day. Sometimes she's a silly goose.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes.
And I think you're right. And you are incredibly inspiring. And I can see where he gets his strength from. You're an incredible role model.
Thank you.
And from afar, you have inspired me. And I love the fact that what you're wearing on your shirt. Fear not.
I'm
Fear.
wearing paradise because that's where I am right now.
He's on the Hope Show and he's in paradise. I love it. That's great.
Amen.
But I was going to say, fear can do two things. It can either paralyze you,
Yes.
or it can push you forward. And in the Jar of Hope case, it's pushed us forward
Amen.
to get over everything that we've had to over the years. And you are the epitome of that. And if we can share, Danielle's been fighting cancer for the last couple of years. How many years has it been now?
I was diagnosed in February of
February 2, yep,
24.
24.
February of 24, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer in my left breast, and I had lymph node involvement. I received 8 rounds of chemotherapy. I had a double mastectomy with lymph node removal and sentinel lymph node removal, and I had 25 rounds of radiation. And then this past Monday, I had a complete hysterectomy to try to eradicate anything else that might be trying to start some trouble within my body.
Well, God bless you in your fight, and any other woman out there who's going through or has gone through what you're going through.
I wish that I was as strong and of a confident of a person as I am now, having dealt with what I dealt with and coming out of it, because I think I probably would have been a stronger parent to him. Like, maybe I don't have to be afraid to take you out of school. Maybe it'll be okay. Maybe I can homeschool you. I am 10 times the stronger person that I am now for having gone through that.
Do you think because you see things differently?
I think because being scared and being
Yeah, welcome to my world.
being scared and being of nervous does not stop anything from happening.
Right.
It's going to happen, right? So, and being afraid of something only means that you're about to do something brave. So why not? So do it scared. Do it scared, do it afraid, face your fears and do it, because it's not going to stop anything from happening.
Right.
So it's made me change. I would board a plane and I'd be like, oh, if I'm afraid, then the plane won't crash because I'm afraid, right? Well, I was afraid of having breast cancer for many, many years, and lo and behold, it did come to fruition, unfortunately. But
I mean, you got some nice hair out of it.
I did.
Yeah, you did. It's true.
I did. I always had
you wear
long
it
hair
well.
that I hated, and now I'm rocking the shortcut. So you're right.
That's great.
You're right. But for any woman that's going through it, for anybody in their support system who's going through it, my greatest wish is, 1, I wish that you're well. And 2, I wish that you just have people in your life who will find you when you're in the trenches and not try to rip you out of those trenches, but sit with you in them and then pull you out when you're ready.
One of the most heartwarming things when I saw you going through what you were going through is there was an image on Facebook with your friends from the gym.
I can't. Dancing outside my chemo
Oh my
window.
Oh, I
God.
remember that.
I kept thinking, I'm
For
like,
for 8 sessions, regardless of the weather.
Yeah.
And these were my friends. These were people who I
Amazing.
simply spent an hour with of my day. And yeah, they
they were inspiring.
are. The
They were.
other people that were getting chemo would come into my room. I would go to the cancer center for my infusions, and they would be like, "Oh, she's here. They're going to be here today."
Because
And they
not
would come.
everybody has that.
No. So I would have, if whoever wanted to come into my room to come look out my window, the doctors would come in, the staff would come in, because to see things like that, it gives you hope in humanity again.
Yes, it does.
You know?
Right? Oh, it was beautiful to see, and I'm glad that you're on the other side of things now.
Yes,
Which is
amen.
great. So now
Amen.
you have a clear.
Today, yes, I do.
Okay. And how long do you have to? You got to go every 6 months.
I go for blood work every 3 months. They're constantly monitoring. I just hope to be here for as many years as the good Lord lets me.
Your
because
fight's not over.
No,
It's not over.
I'll miss him too much, and my husband too.
But let's digress, right?
Yes.
And talk about your son, because he's an amazing young man.
Amazing.
And for the moms that are out there who are on the fence like you were, right? And I think this is why I wanted to pull you in and put you on the show, because there's other moms out there going, does my son or my daughter have autism?
Right.
They speak, they make eye contact.
Yes.
Your son speaks well, he
Yes.
makes eye contact.
He gets up, he's responsible, he takes care of it, he can do his things, he
Yeah.
drives, he goes. So it's like, and you're so conditioned. When he was growing up, he was delayed speech until he was I took him for evaluations, and soon as the first day the speech therapist was in my house, she was like, well, what do you do to make him speak? I'm like, nothing. He lives in a home with 4 adults. We do everything for him. It's me, Dad, his grandmother, and his grandfather. He points to something, and it magically appears. And so I took him for assessments, and everything was fine, reciprocal, both ways, understood everything, project everything perfectly, would pick things. And the therapist was like, okay. And she was like, do you want this toy? And he like groaned. And she was like, no, you have to ask for it. And he was like, well, I want toy. And she was like, there you go, there's your answer. So I'm like, okay, and they're like,
So he's fine?
So they're like, so he went through 6 months of by the end of, they cut his sessions down to every other week. They were like, he's clear, no problems, that's fine. I'm like, okay. And back then, 18 years ago, it was, do they roll a ball back and forth, right? Do they look at you? Do they speak? If they're hitting those markers, that's, it was never and he'll often say, he's like, because I think, he's like, I would probably more be Asperger's than autism.
Okay.
And when they eliminated the Asperger
I think it's
aspect
less
of it,
that, because even I don't know if Asperger's would ever explain
No.
stuff. Again, it's I always say the issue with autism is like, at least what I think is like what kind of held me back was that they have the symptom set, of course, but they just don't explain why the symptoms are the way they are. And I tried to ask that all the time in therapy. I was like, why is this a problem? Why is this a problem?
Right.
And I just never got an answer.
Right.
And like when I went to AI and I was able to ask why is this thing, and I was like, oh, here's why. I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh my God.
my thing is be
But,
brave. If you question anything,
And even with my own story, I just want to add, just 'cause I think this is such a big note, but I'm one person on the spectrum. Like, they say autism spectrum. It really is. Like, I don't, like, I guess I just have my one experience of what autism is like. Again, like, there's variants of symptoms. There's, what symptoms I do have, what symptoms I don't have, where they show up, why they show up, There's so many little nuances and asterisks to it that it's like, I'm just coming on to share what I've learned about myself and like what I experienced, just because maybe someone else out there, maybe they won't relate just because their autism is different than mine. Maybe someone will relate and be like, oh my God, like someone finally said the things that have been stuck in my head for years. Or maybe, oh, this little phenomenon he talked about is something that I experienced, So my goal is mostly just, this is my experience. Feel free to like kind of pick and choose, like a buffet, I guess. Buffet my brain.
right.
Okay, so last words.
Yeah.
What would you tell those out there who feel themselves, who are in your situation, whether or not something's different? What would you recommend they do?
You have to understand yourself. Once you understand yourself, for me, it doesn't matter whether, other people experience it, whether or not, I could be the only person in the world who experiences the things I do, and if it just make coherent sense, I'd be like, oh my God, this is translatable. This can make sense to other people. Like, cool beans, I don't know how much anyone else relates to that, but for me at least, I'd rather, I'm cool with just sitting with like, if what I experience is rare, then so be it. If I'm the only one who really experiences what I do, then so be it. It's just, it makes sense. It helps me. Some people prefer, some people want, you're not alone. That's that's real too. So I guess I say, on one hand, of course, I'm sure I'm not the only one. So I do say you're not alone, but I also say, for me at least, it's just things clicked into place once I finally was like, this makes sense. And
So are you okay with,
yeah.
if anyone out there is feeling the same way Alessandro's feeling, to call Jar of Hope and then we'll put you in touch?
Why not?
Are you okay with that?
Why not?
To help other people get through what they're going through?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, I could try and help.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how good I'd be, but I'd be happy to, try and point a finger or say, hey, like, I could try to make sense of this for you.
So if you feel that way, please reach out to Jim at jarofhope.org. And it'd be our pleasure to help you cope and get through what you're going through and get you to the help that you need. Mom, last words.
I just want to thank you first. First of all, thank you so much for giving my sweet boy a platform to share his story and hopefully help anyone else. And my last word is don't question your gut in anything in life. Don't
Yeah,
question
true.
your gut, right? Don't question your gut and just do what you feel's right and be the mama, papa, friend, whatever that you need to be for anyone in your life.
I say listen to your gut because, what I went through. Look, I say, I went through as a kid, I learned what worked for me as a kid, and I just pushed away against it because it was too weird or too strange. And in reality, if someone had just said, hey, this is normal for your system because you're autistic, I would be like,
Right. Right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
listen to your gut because,
Right.
I follow my intuition, I follow my gut. You gotta, it really is,
Right.
just follow
Amen.
your gut and just sometimes you just really do just kind of know best of,
Amen.
yeah, so follow your
Amen.
gut, follow your
Follow
intuition.
your gut.
Follow your
This has
intuition.
been an exceptional podcast. I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
And I know this was impromptu to have you come on, but thank you for sharing your
Thank you
story
so
as
much.
well, because
Thank
the
you.
perception of having mom, it's two different journeys,
Yes.
dealing
Yeah.
with what he's going through and then
Yes.
your own journey, right? So, and this is the Hope Show, and the Hope Show is about helping other people excel. That's what life is all about.
Yep.
Help your fellow neighbor. Jar of Hope, Team Jamesy. Thank you.
My mission is to find a cure for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, no matter what it takes.
This is The Hope Show, powered by All American Ford, Alfano Renovations, and Adapting Social. Now let's dive in.